guys, today's YouTube video is all about stories and the stories that we create. In my opinion, we all have a book of life, and whether we're aware of it or subconsciously aware of the story that we're creating, it's important to really talk about what your story is and what are the times that you want to look back through certain chapters to learn from them to help you create your chapters in the present and in the future. In therapy, I talk a lot about the book of life and the chapter that's already been written and how we can turn the page and start fresh. And when we're writing our chapters, we can look at first the table of contents. You know, we can't just jump into the story. A lot of times we want to look at, you know, the chapter's names, the table of contents, you know, what's coming. And so I thought it would be good just to kind of get you guys to think about the story. What's the story that you're living right now? What are your previous chapters? And what story, you know, maybe you are ready to turn the page and look at the blank slate and say, what are my first 3 chapters going to be? Or what do I want in my table of contents moving forward? The other thing is, there's a quote by Hans Christian Andersen, and I really like it. He says, "Life is the most wonderful fairy tale." And whether you buy into fairy tales or not, to me what that quote means is life is a wonderful adventure, and it's life can be magical. And I get it. There are times in our story that we suffer or that we experience pain or loss and grief or trauma of any kind, and in those moments it's devastating. So, you know, I get it's how do we pick ourselves up and learn from those past experiences. You know, I once said, everybody falls, but it's the way in which we choose to pick ourselves up and keep moving forward that makes the difference. And it doesn't mean that you just, you know, wipe away your pain or shove it down or you know, suppress all your trauma. It means you learn from, you work through. You do at times have to walk through your grief, and in order to help you move forward. And this is all happening as you create this story. And so again, in therapy, we talk about, you know, this story that was already created and how we kind of turn the page. And sometimes it's hard to turn the page. It's hard to let go of certain chapters in our life. So I think, you know, those are the moments, and I know I've talked about this before, but we have to really pay attention to what are we holding on to and what are we afraid to let go of? What do I need to know about this chapter to help me turn the page and move forward? How do I get to the present moment? Because again, we don't just want to, you know, just focus solely on the past, and we can't just focus solely on the future. We have to focus on what's right in front of us, what's in the present moment, what is the story that we're creating in the here and now. So, you know, those are just some things that I think are important as we go through this book of life that we're creating. The other story that I want to talk about is if you're in a relationship and the story of us, or that's what I call it. And a lot of times Dr. John Gottman talks about, you know, talking about how you first met and first came together. So when I'm meeting with a couple, I really like to go through how you first met and came together. What was your first date like? What were your first impressions of each other? What attracted you to one another? And how you fell in love. And it's important to really think about, you know, those things, especially when you're starting to notice some negativity in the relationship. Again, it doesn't mean we go back to that story and it's like, oh, we got to recreate that story. It's what do we want to remember to help us in the here and now write a new chapter? You know, because we can't go back in time and be who we used to be or be the relationship that we used to be, but we can learn from it, especially if we're noticing that we're struggling. It's always good to remember the fond memories of one another. Again, not to avoid what's happening in the present moment, but just to remind yourself of positivity, the good things that have been happening in your relationship. Negativity is really heavy, and it likes us just to stay in a negative place. So we need to remind ourselves of the story of us. And it's always fun when I ask couples about that to see them smile and remember the beginning. So sometimes, as I said, whether you're in a relationship or, just at a spot in your life where change is coming, it's okay to look back in time in those previous chapters to learn from those past experiences to help you in the present moment. Another story that we need to talk about is the assumption story and how the assumption story can be detrimental to the relationship. And that happens usually when we start making assumptions about each other. And in the assumption story, what we do is we start playing out like little scenarios that maybe haven't happened, but we're just assuming. I know my partner is going to do this. She's going to say this. He's going to say that. She's going to do that. He's going to say this. And we go he, she, back and forth. And all of a sudden we've created this big assumption story, and we start making decisions based on the assumption story instead of the story that's right in front of us. So if we can catch ourselves in that assumption story, stop sign, imagine that stop sign, and focus on what is right in front of you, not what's happening. It's like seeing your partner for who they are right in front of you, him or her, instead of creating the story of who you think they are, who you want them to be, or what you think they're doing. So that is super important to catch yourself doing that. So if you notice that you're in that assumption story, it's time to pause and, like I said, try to stop that line of thinking, see the things that are right in front of you, and maybe take some time to really talk to your partner about what's going on, how you're feeling, what you might need, describe your own thoughts and feelings or what you'd like to do instead of assuming your partner's thoughts and feelings, because that can lead to resentment. It can also lead to contempt if we stay in that assumption story. So, I've just gone through a couple of different stories, but again, think about your book of life and what are the chapters that have been written. What are you writing right now? And what are some things that you'd like to maybe write about in the future? So it's important to learn from our past experiences. It's important to keep writing that chapter. And mostly it's important to enjoy the amazing life that is right in front of you. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel for weekly updates all about relationships. So I hope you have a beautiful day.